Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. As always, I'm excited to be here with each and every one of you. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. This is episode 87, so we're fast approaching the 100th episode. But this one today is going to be a little bit different because obviously we've had a tremendous run so far in all the information and education that we have been providing. And we have received a lot of accolades on the last three podcasts that we did, which was Understanding Your Financial Paradigms in Retirement. Then I did another one on 25 to 45% tax reduction in retirement. And then last week, I did a podcast on ways to manage taxation in retirement. And all of those got a tremendous amount of accolades, and I received close to 30 emails from many of you asking for more information, asking additional questions based on some of your issues and concerns. So today, I want to go ahead and take a few minutes. I'm not going to do this very long today, but it's going to be a short podcast on always think outside of the box. So that's going to be episode 87. Always think outside of the box. And I think, whenever you hear that, and I'm sure most of us on this podcast has heard that before, the big question is, well, what does it really mean? What does it mean to think outside the box? And it means a lot of things, or it means different things to different people. But from my perspective, thinking outside of the box means that you want to be a contrarian. You want to take a look at everything that is happening around you, whether it's your personal life or your financial life, and you need to put things in perspective and start looking at them from outside of the box. By the way, for those of you that may not know where that saying came from, back in the 1930s, there was a study that was done at a university, and it was called Thinking Outside of the Box, and it was the 9-dot study. If any of you wants to read a little bit about that, I have an article which is very, very good. Just send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to forward that to you, because what it does is allows everyone that reads the article to start thinking about their lives and to start thinking outside of the box. And this is a 9-dot, 3 dots across, and then obviously another line with 3 dots across, and a third line with 3 dots across. So there were a total of 9 dots. And the issue there was that you needed to get a pencil. You needed to draw a line, go across each and every one of those dots once without ever lifting the pencil off the paper. And what would happen is most of the people that try to do it, and I think it was based on what I remember on the 9-dot study, which I read about a year ago, the last time I've read it several times, is that close to 95% of the students that tried to go through the exercise failed. Either they would have no choice but to take their pencil off the paper, or they would have no choice but to go over the same dot more than once. And the only way to get it done was that you needed to go outside of those dots. You needed to go outside of the square. You needed to go outside of the box. And then you could actually go through each and every dot without violating the rules of the study that was put together. So that's where the whole thing from thinking outside of the box came from. Now, when it comes to retirement distribution planning, when it comes to retirement, or when it comes to financial planning, what does it really mean? Well, from my perspective, and I've talked about this in the past, is that you have to look at your financial life as opposed to looking at it through a microscope. You have to be able to look at it through a telescope. And the view is totally different. When you start to look at the financial decisions that you have made in the past, or the financial decisions that you're going to be making in the future, and you start to put them in perspective, and you start to look at them through a telescope as opposed to a microscope, an entire new world is going to open up for all of you. You're going to be able to see things from a view that you had never seen before. You're going to be able to gauge the impact of each and every one of your financial decisions from an inherent telescopic view, because you're going to be able to see that by making a decision on one side of the ledger, through a microscope, you're not going to be able to see whether it's going to have a positive or a negative impact on the other side of the ledger. But once you look at it through a telescope, now you're going to be able to see both sides, and you will be able to financially gauge whether that decision that you're thinking about making will make sense to you and your family or not. Another way to think outside of the box is, and I really don't care how much money you have already set aside for retirement, or if you're close to retirement, or if you're 5 years or 10 years away from retirement, think of it this way. Most of the money that you will need in retirement, you haven't earned yet. Therefore, you better do a very good job in managing your assets and your retirement and your finances in retirement, because otherwise the money that you have set aside for your retirement and your qualified plans, or if you've done any type of tax planning, that money has to earn additional monies and sufficient money to maintain your lifestyle for the rest of your life. Now, one of the things that I try to tell my clients on an ongoing basis, because every time that we do a review, and normally we do review with our clients anywhere between 2 to 3 times a year. Some clients, depending on their on the type of plan that I have for them, then we do quarterly reviews, so we'll do 4 reviews a year. But for each and every one of the clients that we manage here at Gables and at Cambridge, we do reviews at least twice a year. So that's a very, very good thing, because in our industry, sadly enough, the vast majority of financial advisors out there very seldom do any reviews with their clients, and that's a shame, and that should be illegal. But obviously, that's the way the world is. So the one thing I try to tell all my clients whenever they come to me and they bring me all kinds of issues and concerns that they have about their businesses, their finances, and their retirement, I always say the same thing. Look, make sure that the main thing in your life is to keep the main thing the main thing. Let me repeat that. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So you have to identify what are the main things in your financial life that you need to pay attention to, and just make certain that you keep them at the forefront of every decision-making process that you will do now and or in the future. Now, obviously, we've talked in the past about retirement pitfalls, and it's always good to make certain that I bring it to the forefront as well. One of the things that I do on an ongoing basis, I do seminars on a monthly basis at local companies, also at local universities, and we pretty much do retirement workshops. And the type of retirement workshop that I do is called Taxes in Retirement. Because if you truly understand the impact of taxes in retirement and you're able to do something about it, then your retirement life is going to be much, much better than if you don't do any type of tax planning whatsoever. Now, there are a lot of competitors and advisors out there that do all kinds of different seminars. And the big question is, well, Bert, and this is a decision that I made many years ago, I'd rather do one seminar to multiple different groups of people than do multiple seminars to the same group. And the reason for that is that when you become a specialist in retirement distribution planning and or tax planning as I have become, then it makes a lot of sense for people to come to our workshops, because they're going to learn something specific as opposed to just throwing a lot of stuff against a wall and hoping that something is going to stick along those lines. So some of the retirement pitfalls that I talk about in every single workshop or podcast or webcast or seminar that I do is, like for instance, there was a case in the Supreme Court many years ago, and the Supreme Court justice that was in charge of that case, in his legal decision on the case, basically said, and I quote, that the legal right of an individual to decrease the amount of what would otherwise be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. Let me repeat that. The legal right of an individual to decrease the amount of what would otherwise be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. So basically, even the Supreme Court of the United States said that, look, there's a big difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. You can do all the tax avoidance that you can possibly imagine, as long as that tax avoidance stays within the guidelines, because once you get over the threshold and then you get into not tax avoidance but tax evasion, then obviously the rules of engagement totally change and is definitely not for your betterment. What are some of the other retirement pitfalls that you need to pay attention to? Well, taking money out too quickly, liquidating assets in the wrong order. We've talked about that before. And sequencing of returns. Sequencing of returns is going to be one of the major pitfalls that most of you listening to this podcast are going to have to be able to deal with at some point in time in retirement. Now, people think that retirement is easy. People think that when they get to the age of retirement, which for most would be age 65 or age 67, they're going to have a pool of assets. Life is going to go on. They're going to start using that money, and then, they're hoping for a lot of good things to happen in the future, although I always say that hope is not a financial strategy. So what are some of the other things, in addition to taking money out too quickly, or liquidating your assets in the wrong order, or sequencing of returns? What are the other issues and concerns that you need to be worried about when it comes to retirement distribution planning in your retirement life? Well, obviously taxes, inflation, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, propensity to consume. Some of us have a tendency to consume more than others. Financial fees, are you going to have to pay to financial institutions along the way? Premature death, living too long, which is the issue of longevity, living with a disability. So obviously, when you start really thinking about retirement, there's a lot of stuff you got to pay attention to. Now, of all these things that we've talked about, which one do you think would be the most important and the most critical one to pay attention to and to at least try to do something about? Well, I would argue that living too long or longevity planning is the most critical thing that you need to worry about when it comes to your retirement life. Why? Because if you live long enough, all the others are going to happen to you at some point in time in the future. So if you live long enough, you're probably going to see, tax increases. You're definitely going to see inflation. You're obviously going to see stock market volatility, interest rate volatility. You may be spending too much at one point in time in your life, sometimes because you want to, sometimes because you have no choice. You're obviously going to be paying more in financial fees. Most important, one of the things that's going to happen is you're going to have to deal with long-term care. Now, one of the fallacies of long-term care, and this is something that if you live too long, you're definitely going to be facing, is that, many Americans feel that, I'm not going to worry about long-term care, although it's going to happen to you 72% of the time. Yeah, you heard me correct. 72% of the time, if you live long enough, either you or your spouse is going to have a need for a long-term care, or you're going to have to be in a long-term care facility. And I was actually visiting with a client about, 6-7 months ago, and we were doing some planning, and we had done a fairly decent job. But then we needed to discuss the risk of living with a disability, and he said, well, I'm not too worried about that, Bert. And the reason why I'm not too worried about that is, if I ever go into a situation where I need long-term care, my wife is going to take care of me. And I said, oh, really? So how do you figure that? Well, she's going to... I said, well, what if your wife also has a long-term care necessity? Well, I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. But, in my case, because I'm about 5 years older, more than likely I'm going to be the first one who's going to need this. So therefore, she can take care of me. So I said, okay. So why don't we go through a quick exercise? We were sitting at their kitchen table, and I said, look, because obviously they live very close to my office, and they wanted me to come over, so I did that. I normally see clients either over the internet or they come to my office, but from time to time I want to get out and go see clients. So in this case, I went to their home, and obviously they had coffee for me, so it worked out really well. But I said to the husband, and the husband said, do me a favor. I said, would you mind getting up from your chair right now and just lay down on the floor? And he goes, well, what do you want me to do that for? And I said, well, just follow my thought process. Just get up and lay down on the floor. So he did. He got up and sat down and then lay down on the floor. And then I turned to his wife. Now, he's 58 and she's 53. So I said, Jane, I'm just using a name to protect the innocent. I said, do me a favor. Would you mind reaching over, pick up your husband, and put him back on the chair? And I said to the husband, don't do anything to help yourself. Just let your wife pick you up and try to sit you on the chair again. Guess what the wife said to me? Bert, I can't do that. I'm not strong enough to pick him up. So obviously I turned to the two of them and said, well, that's only now. You're 53, he's 58. Fast forward 20 years from now. Now, Mr. Klein, you'll be 78 and your wife will be 73. Do you think she's going to be stronger then than she is today? The answer is no. All of a sudden, they started to think from a different perspective because I used an analogy that hit home for most of them. So at the end of the day, you need to protect yourselves. You need to make sure that you plan for longevity planning. And just so you'll know this, because this is going to be very, very critical for those of you that are always listening to our podcast, and again, I thank you for this. The role of annuities in retirement is very, very critical. And the reason is that no other product can accomplish cash flow and income guarantees like annuities can. So, I don't care who you listen to. You can listen to all these money managers that are gurus that, they say and they talk about, making certain that if you call me, they're going to get you to an excellent retirement life. If you don't have annuities in your retirement portfolio, you're never going to have a good retirement life. And one of the reasons for that is I don't care how many Monte Carlo calculations you do. By the way, Monte Carlo calculations are probability calculations. They're not retirement. You cannot go into retirement basing your retirement assumptions on probabilities, because the real truth is that the probability that your probability is never going to happen is 100%. And as a matter of fact, even when you see Monte Carlo calculations that go out to age 90 and life is good and you're able to maintain your standard of living, and therefore you're not going to run out of money before you run out of life, do me a favor, just have them do the same people that you're talking to that are running these Monte Carlo calculations, have them run those calculations to age 95 or age 100, which is the fastest growing population in the United States. You know what you're going to see? What you're going to see is that all of those Monte Carlo calculations will fail. 100% of all those calculations will fail. Now, when it comes to annuities, if you have an annuity in the portfolio, meaning that you transferred the risk of longevity from yourself to an insurance company for an income and a cash flow and a guarantee, those checks are going to be coming into you every single month of every single year for the rest of your life, whether you want to or not. So if you had $10,000 coming in this month, well, you might as well spend it, because next month there will be another $10,000, and the month after that, and the month after that. It is the only way, and the only way that you're going to be able to protect against the risk of living too long. And even if you don't have any type of long-term care, you can actually segment your annuity purchases to make sure that they are triggered at different ages and different brackets of your life, between your go-go years, your slow-go years, and the no-go years. So even if you have a long-term care issue, but then again, you never bothered to protect yourself against that, the fact that you have annuities and the fact that you have annuity guarantees are going to provide that income, so at least you can offset some of those additional expenses you're going to be receiving because of the fact that now you have a medical condition that requires care along those lines. So obviously, annuities in the United States, there are many companies that offer them. It's like going to buy ice cream at Baskin Robbins. You know, there are 31 flavors. You have to identify which annuities are going to be the best for you based on what it is that you want to accomplish. You know, there are fixed annuities or immediate annuities or variable annuities, and there are index annuities. There are many different types of annuities. You have to be able to do your due diligence. Obviously, you can always reach out to me for more information along those lines, and at least we can do a complete study as to what may be the most suitable thing for you. Now, many of my clients, by the way, they segment their annuities based on the forecast of retirement income necessities in the future. You know, some clients may say, you know what, Bert, I just want to purchase enough annuity income to make certain that my fixed expenses, and then we do a fudge factor there to increase some inflation, because expenses do have a tendency to go up based on inflation. But I just want to buy sufficient income to make certain that I'm never going to have to worry about my fixed expenses for the rest of my life and that of my family. And then the rest of the money, I'm going to do other things with it. Now, I have had other clients that are a lot more conservative. They want to buy as much guaranteed income as they possibly can. And by the way, for those of you that may not know this, if you're in retirement, what percentage of your retirement income would you like to have guaranteed? I would bet each and every one of you that if you truly think about this, your one answer and your only answer should be, Bert, I would want 100% of my retirement income and my retirement cash flow to be guaranteed. Because if it is guaranteed, then you have nothing to worry about. Now, the last thing I want to talk about briefly deals with, you know, never let good enough be good enough. And this is something that obviously whenever I do workshops or whenever I do reviews with my clients or I engage a client for the first time, you know, many a times when they come to see me, there's always a perception that, you know, I think I've done okay. I think I've done very good. I think I should be okay from a retirement perspective. And they have that mentality. But what I always say to them is, look, never let good enough be good enough. And the reason for that is take a look at the stock market. You know, the market this week is doing much better. The last 2 to 3 weeks, I was doing horribly. And by the way, do you think the market is going to do bad in the very near future? Absolutely. And there's going to be a market crash. And now we have an election coming up. And now we have all the issues with the tariffs. And we have Iran. And we have North Korea. And we have China. We have a presidential election. We have impeachment. We have all these things that none of us can control. Yet we're making all our bets on a successful retirement life. So I always say, look, never let good enough be good enough. And what are some of my thoughts along those lines? Well, take a look at the stock market again. Bulls make money, bears make money, pigs always, always, always get slaughtered. So what you want to make sure you're not the pig. Because if you're the pig, then chances are you're going to have a horrible retirement life, and you're going to run out of money before you run out of life. Now, what if you can be a bull all the time and never be a bear? So if you have a portfolio, let's say index annuities, where the only thing that you can do is either break even or make money, but you will never lose money, then obviously from a financial standpoint, that's one risk that you have been able to avoid and or that you have been able to do away with. There's a proposal in Congress, and that more than likely is going to get some bipartisan approval, so it should be done, if not by the end of this year, it's going to be done early next year, and it's called the Security Retirement Act proposal. That is going to be there. So it may be the Security Act proposal of 2019 or 2020, depending on when it gets approved. But a lot of things are going to be changing regarding your retirement. And by the way, if Democrats were to take power, and I'm not talking about this from a political standpoint, obviously you just got to listen to them and know that they're going to be raising taxes left and right. Then one of the things that may be proposed is, they may have the ability to start invading your 401k assets a lot sooner than expected. And you have no control over that, because many Americans have a lot of money, or perhaps even all of their retirement assets in there. So you have to make certain that you start to think outside of the box, and always make certain that your financial decisions, that you do them by viewing them through a telescope as opposed to a microscope. The other thing I always say is that you can't learn how to swim by reading a book. You have to get in the water. You have to swallow water. And that's the only way you're going to learn how to swim. And the more you do it, the better off you're going to be. The other recommendation I make to a lot of my clients, and I don't care if you're already in retirement or if you're 5 years, 10 years, 20 years away from retirement, work as long as you possibly can. Forget about the age 65 retirement mentality crap. That doesn't exist anymore. That existed, back in the 30s and 40s, or maybe in the 20s. When people would retire at 65, if you were male, you were going to live an average of 5 years. And if you were female, you were going to live an average of 7 years, and then you were going to die. That doesn't happen anymore. If you retire at age 65, you may be spending a third of your life in retirement, 25, 30, 35, 40 years in retirement. So are you kidding me? You're going to retire at 65? Do you think you're going to have enough money to be able to retire at 65 and not ever have to look at a penny again, or not ever have to work again, or not ever become a Walmart greeter again in your life? Well, I hope you start really thinking outside of the box, because you have to be able to work as long as you possibly can. Stay active. The more active you stay, the healthier you're going to be in retirement. And obviously, don't even think about age 65. Don't think about age 70. I have clients of mine that they're in their mid-80s and they're still working. And obviously, some of them are very successful business owners and they're still working. I have a very, very good client who's now 74 years of age, started his business at the age of 65, and he's doing extremely well. He's generating like $15,000 a month in income for himself and his family. And he started that business at age 65. So get the age 65 out of your mind. The other thing is Dan Sullivan, which is someone in the financial services industry who's a tremendous speaker that I follow more often than not. I have learned a lot from him because he looks at the philosophy of retirement from all kinds of different points of view. And one of the things that he always says, and this goes hand in hand with my recommendation, that you need to work as long as you possibly can, and do not look at 65 as your age of retirement. This is what Dan Sullivan said, and I quote, "Always make your future bigger than your past. Make your ambitions greater than your memories. And if you do so, you will always enjoy a sense of purpose, momentum, and vitality for the rest of your life. And that's exactly how I think about my practice, my companies, my business, the service that I provide to each and every one of my clients, the podcasts that I do on a weekly basis, the webcasts that I do, the book that I'm reading now, that I'm writing now, that I should be done with by the end of the year. You'll get more information along those lines. The seminars that I do, and the financial literacy that I provide to my community, because I feel very strongly about always giving something back. So this is the podcast for today. As always, feel free to reach out to me if you want to discuss any of these topics that we have covered today. You can call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can always reach out to me at Bert, B-E-R-T, at GablesTaxGroup.com. Let me give you another email just in case, if it makes it easier for you. You can also email me at Bert, B-E-R-T, at BertSalazar.com. That would be BertSalazar.com. And always remember that my goal in each and every one of these podcasts that we do on a weekly basis is to kind of help you change the way that you see things. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, thanks very much for your time today. Have a wonderful week. Have a great weekend. And we'll talk again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.